Hello everyone. I'm talking about making a video about Barber coins like this one. This is the first year, and why these stayed in circulation so long to get this worn out. Part of the reason, and someone messed up on the date on this because that's 1916, but part of the reason is I've done all this. I was looking at Wikipedia and wrote all these little events down. All this is wars leading up to 1900. A lot of them you might remember, but the Spanish-American War, 1898, and the Philippine-American War, 1899 to 1902. Some of these other ones, Greco-Turkish War, Italian-Ethiopian War, Sino-Japanese War, you might not remember them. But right off the bat, when they started making these coins, 1892, the United States entered into a financial crisis. The Philadelphia and Reading Railroad went bankrupt, and it caused a panic. This is an Orleans mint quarter in pretty good shape. You see the old mint there. 1893. So that panic lasted until 1896. There were bank runs, credit crunches. Sound pretty familiar because that stuff happens all the time. Still does and still will. Although we try to regulate our way around it, it just doesn't happen. 1898. 1899, a little dark. 1906, which doesn't look too bad. It's hard to find half dollars of these in very good shape. And the 1906 old, which is also in not real bad shape. A few years after this, in 1909, they would close the Orleans Mint and stop making coins. But they did make them in 1909. This is a fairly nice version, or specimen, of a 1909 Orleans Mint dime. But getting back to the history part, somewhere around 1903, the big stick ideology came along, and that was Theodore Roosevelt. And the United States began to take a more pronounced role in global events. But all through the early 1900s, there were all kinds of little bitty wars, all leading up to what they called then the Great War, or World War I, which would run from 1914 to 1918. Most of the major countries in the world, the most advanced or populous, whatever, were involved in it in one way or another. That's why they called it the Great War. It wasn't until World War II got going on that they started referring to it as World War I. In World War II, almost the entire world was involved in one way or another. But from 1920 until 1940, there were all kinds of wars, colonies wanting to break loose of their, declare their independency and be their own country. Anyway, after the Great War, everyone probably remembers that there was the Spanish flu, which lasted a couple years and killed a lot of people. Very deadly. Now this particular coin, I wish I had a half dollar and a quarter in this kind of shape to show them, because they would look pretty nice. This is a pretty spectacular condition to coin. But anyway, it's hard to believe it didn't get circulated that much. But, I mean, after World War I and the Spanish flu, almost immediately we went into the roaring 20s, where the stock market went crazy and people made so much money in the stock market, something like a dime here, was no matter to most of the rich people anyway. And if you were poor back then, you still needed to eat, and a dime would buy you some food. So, or a $50, you know, you could buy food with quite a bit with a $50 then. But up until 1929, when the Black Friday happened and the stock market crashed, we went into a major depression. Another good reason why these kind of coins just stayed in circulation, because, well, for one thing, people don't like them very much, and another thing is when it's the Great Depression, everybody's hurting. Unemployment skyrocketed. If you had money, you went and bought food. So this stuff just got circulated. And by the late 30s, when the Depression was starting to ease some, war tensions were growing for World War II. And it didn't take long before the world was at war again, and we entered the war after, Pearl Harbor. And we were in the war for most of the rest of the time, for about 5 years before the Germans and Japanese all surrendered, and the Italians. But so that leads us to 1945. Now, after the war, there was a lot of reconstruction in Europe because of the Marshall Plan. And they wanted to, get Europe back up and back in some kind of shape so that they could be trading partners and whatnot. Because the war constrained trade quite a bit because everything was going for war effort. But anyway, after that, 1945 through probably 3 or 4 years of the Marshall Plan, it wasn't long after that before we were at war in Korea, which, I think it started in 1949 or 1950 or something like that. It would last a few years, which takes us up to the 50s, and coin dealers have told me these kind of coins, Barber coins, stayed in circulation pretty much into the 50s, that their dads were still getting these in their change. And we didn't go off the silver standard for coin until after 64. 1964 or 90% silver, just like this. So these were just 50 cents until then, pretty much. So and no one really liked the design a whole lot, so no one really saved a lot of them. That's why there's not a whole lot of them in this kind of shape. If you want to get a $50 that's in this kind of shape, you're going to spend a lot of money. It's going to be about almost $600 for a graded example. So, and the quarters aren't much cheaper for the most part. And some of these, they didn't mint a whole lot in certain years, so they become scarce, hard to find. But anyway, there were so many reasons why this stuff didn't get saved. It just went to circulation over and over again. But this particular coin is easily the best looking Barber coin I have. I can get the light to hit it just right, and you can see the mint luster spiral around the coin and on the back as well. This wasn't real cheap, but like I said, a quarter or a $50 in this kind of shape would have been a lot more than the dime was. But anyway, that's my take on the Barber coins and why they stayed in circulation so long. Be interesting to see if anybody has any comments or wants to counter any of the points I made. Anyway, have a good day, and if you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. I will do more if this does well.